Have you ever asked for help in designing a tabletop role-playing game and people just say, you should read more role-playing games? Well, that advice may be true, but it doesn't really help because there are hundreds, if not thousands, of excellent tabletop role-playing games out there. Where do you even begin to study? This video will act as your guide to the 5 tabletop role-playing games you can read to kickstart your design journey. Hi, I'm Peter, creator and lead designer of Tales from Elsewhere, and on this YouTube channel we go into game design philosophy, looking at the structures and mechanisms that go into making our favorite tabletop role-playing games. We're not here to determine what games are good or bad or cool or not. Instead, we're here to just learn lessons from those designs and apply them to our own design journey. This channel also acts as a dev blog for the creation of my tabletop role-playing game, Tales from Elsewhere. The first setting book is called Clockworld, and it's action, horror, post-apocalyptic Weird West. If you want to know more about that, check out the links below. Every week, we release a new video tackling some subject within the game design space. So if you'd like to be notified when the next video is coming, don't forget to like, subscribe, and do all the normal YouTube stuff. Alright, that all out of the way, let's go into my maybe controversial picks for 5 games you should study. A quick preamble. I chose games that I thought would be good for beginning game designers, ones just starting that journey, not necessarily ones that experienced game designers need to study, ones that would require their more advanced knowledge. And additionally, I'm not your dad, this is just my pick, and it actually doesn't line up perfectly with the 30 some odd designers I queried in the Tales from Elsewhere Discord server, the data for which I will link down below if you want to take a look at a myriad of interesting games to study. Alright, let's get into my first pick. My first pick is Blades in the Dark. Created by John Harper and released back in 2017, this is a game that is ostensibly powered by the apocalypse under the hood, but has placed such awesome layers on top of that I think it's a great study point. It has a number of things going for it that I think as a designer, while reading it, you should pay attention to. Pay attention to the intentionality of the rules. Everything in Blades in the Dark is clearly designed to fulfill the purpose of that game. It doesn't stack onto it extraneous subsystems that aren't going to feed into its core gameplay loop. And it tells you its gameplay loop right from the start, and it's very specific. It's about heists and scoundrels and their vices and foibles, and about the political intrigue of Duskbowl, and the game just tells you this in the rules itself. Pay attention to how it very clearly states whether the GM or the player gets to decide any given result or rule. It tells you that the players get to determine which skills are relevant, but the GM determines how hard it would be to use those skills. So it's not saying that the GM is going to say, roll me a perception check. The players choose how they'd like to solve any given problem, and the rules specifically tell you that that's the case. So pay attention to how it's delineated who's responsible for what. I'd be remiss, of course, if I didn't mention clocks. Study how the clocks system, these countdown timers, have been integrated throughout Blades in the Dark to accommodate all sorts of different resolutions. We could do a whole hour-long deep dive probably on clocks alone, but just pay attention to that as you read. Lastly, take a look at its harm system, how it conceptualizes incoming injury or psychic trauma or exhaustion, and how it's only player-facing. The players don't inflict harm on the enemies, the players receive harm for failing to overcome obstacles or threats. So look at how they've implemented that structure, as it's very rules light, but also very evocative. Harm is a narrative packet that contains additional mechanical consequence, and definitely look at how they have structured this wound system in there. My second pick is Mothership. Released in 2018 by Tuesday Night Games, this is considered one of the premier sort of rules-light horror role-playing games on the market. And there are a few key things I'd like you to pay attention to when you read this. The first of which is how strongly the vibe of the game is communicated throughout its rules, layouts, and design. This game oozes personality. The cover alone just tells you so much about the game that you're about to read, and it has such a clear aesthetic to it that it immerses you immediately in the type of gameplay experience it's attempting to communicate. And take note of its D percentile roll under system. This is a super common structure in tabletop role-playing games and is one of the most expedient and player-facing ways to go about a skill system. The players all know what they need to roll on the dice before they even pick up the dice, because you're always just rolling D percentile and looking at getting a result below the skill rank you have. It's very simple, and many games could benefit from just using something as expedient and easy to grok as this. The last important detail is in their Warden's Guide, and it's about how to run a session. This game does an amazing job, truly a master class in communicating to the reader how they expect you to run a session of their game. It has some of the best advice for running horror one-shots of almost any role-playing game I've seen, regardless of the role-playing game system you're using. You could take a lot of that Warden's Guide and apply it to any sort of horror role-playing game, and you'd be set to jet. My number 3 pick is Index Card RPG by Runehammer Games, the one and only, and this was released early concepts in 2016 and has had various editions since then. And I think that it is one of the best foundations for OSR or really any game design process you're going to find. And now I was really torn on what sort of OSR game to put in this list because I think everybody should study one OSR game to understand that ideology of design, regardless of what type of game you're making. So, you've got Shadowdark, DCC, list goes on. But I ended up choosing Index Card RPG because it has boiled down so much of the additional complexity that you still find in OSR games into a extremely easy to understand, fluid, and smooth to adjudicate role-playing game. So the main thing I'd like you to pay attention to when you read Index Card RPG is just how clear and actionable its rules are. The way it's presented its game system is so easy to take and then run at a table because it's designed with play in mind. It's not there to pontificate about rule structure in general or provide a bunch of extraneous fluff. It's there to teach you how to play its game, whether you're the player or the GM adjudicating it. And when you see how crisp the math is of Index Card RPG, with the way you set a global target for any given scene and just every roll uses that number as the target number, and you can just have something be easy or hard and it's just -3 or +3, this is so smooth, so easy to adjudicate, and is so player-facing that using it in play is like buttery smooth. And it's such a good structure that I actually have released a separate video just deep diving this aspect of Index Card RPG, which there'll be a link down below too. But I can't stress enough just how clean this system is, how smooth and honestly expedient the structure is here. So as you're reading it, pay attention to just how simple those rules are, but how much you can do with them, how empowering they are. My number 4 pick is the oldest game on this list, GURPS. This was released back in 1986 by the one and only Steve Jackson, the man himself, and I included this game in this list because a universal system, setting agnostic, build your own character class sort of structure, is really hard to design, and a lot of designers want to build these. And so there's things that I think we can learn from GURPS while we're reading it. If you're looking at just the core rules of GURPS, pay attention to actually how simple the underlying math and resolution is in this game, but how much they can layer on top of that. The core die rolls of just 3d6 roll under is very simple, but they've been able to add on to that innumerable subsystems, setting books, and pretty much anything under the sun can be run in GURPS simply because they made a core foundation that's very solid and built to be modular. So as you're reading it, look at how future-proofed some of the structures were in GURPS to allow things to connect to it. And also take note of their use of hexes over squares, which I know is a controversial sort of subject among people, but note how well it uses hexes and how nuanced the combat is, how technical and tactical it can be using those hex grids. And lastly, I challenge you to think of a setting that you can't find a GURPS supplement to handle. I mean, like literally anything under the sun, I bet there's some sort of GURPS supplement out there that would be able to accommodate it. And that in and of itself is interesting to examine and take lessons from, right? If you want to build something that you can play in any sort of structure, look at GURPS and how they did that. And now my 5th pick, and my most controversial, and please hear me out on this, Dungeons & Dragons 4th edition. D&D 4e was released back in 2008 by Wizards of the Coast, and it was not met with commercial or critical success, but I still think it's worth studying, and let me tell you why. Despite that failure, as you're reading this rulebook, take a look at what familiar structures are in this game, and how you've been seeing them in subsequent years pop up in others. Like how the power cards that make up the class structure in D&D 4e can be found in Lancer or Daggerheart and Draw Steel. And look at how fun and awesome each class gets to be in D&D 4e, regardless of whether or not they're a spellcaster or a marshal. That kind of thing was a lesson we forgot for a while and then re-emerged again later, like in games like Draw Steel. And then as you're appreciating some of the cool designs in the game, consider why the game failed. Why didn't this capture the imagination and attention of its core demographic of D&D 3.5 players? And why D&D 5e recaptured that market, recaptured that imagination? Why didn't this work? If you can answer that question, you'll have extracted a lot of good information out of D&D 4e. I'd be curious to know what your 5 recommended TTRPGs are for study, right? Not the ones that you think are the most fun or your favorites, but which ones you think new designers should read when they begin their design journey. Put that down in the comments below and I can add all of this data to my big spreadsheet and we can have this great resource for people to come in and check. The link will be down below. And if you'd like to be part of these sort of discussions or hear more from me, consider joining the Tales from Elsewhere Discord server. I'm super active on there. Or consider becoming a patron. Patrons get an additional video every week that I record unscripted and unedited, examining the prior week's video. So if you'd like to get more juice out of these discussions, consider hopping in on one of those platforms. And I want to thank you for watching this video, and I hope that I see you next week here on Tales from Elsewhere.